Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We've got absolutely loads for you today. We've got the opening week of the County Championship. Peter Handscomb joins the show to give us the inside track on one of the great County Championship upsets. Mark Butcher shares his views on the development of young English spinners, and Wisden India editor Aadya Sharma will run through a genuinely thrilling week in the IPL. I'm Yas Rana, and with me in the studio today is Ben Gardner, and back from his gap year travels, Cam Ponsonby. Cam, you've had quite the winter. Run us through where you've been.
Thank you for having me back. I'm going to be honest, I was quite disappointed yesterday when you messaged me. So I thought you were just happy for me to be back. And then you were like, oh, no, can you come on the pod? And I was like, a bittersweet invitation. No, it's been amazing. I was off in Australia. I basically just followed England around. So I was in Australia for the T20 World Cup. I was in Pakistan for the Test series there. And then I was in New Zealand for that series. It's been a bit of a surreal trip. And yeah, I don't know if I'll get to do it again, but hopefully.
What was the best venue to watch cricket in?
I think Mount Maunganui was the nicest. But if I was to go back to... No, it would be Mount Maunganui, because it's just what you want cricket to be when you think about. There's the banks, there's kind of these beautiful views. You see people kind of eating and drinking on the boundary's edge, and then there's just test cricket happening in the middle.
Yeah.
That would be the best. I mean, but then like Multan will always live so kind of fondly in my memories now for being the most kind of crazy place I've ever been. At the time, it was quite stressful and I was quite happy to leave, but now I look back on it and I go, I miss it.
Yeah, I liked with Wellington that you could see the local McDonald's in the background as the camera panned out. Anyway, let's go to Division 1 in the County Championship. Favourites for the title, Surrey and Lancashire played out a draw at Old Trafford. Cam Steele playing in place of Will Jacks as Surrey's middle order spin option scored 100. He's playing ahead of Amar Verdi and Dan Moriarty in the spin department. There are hundreds for Ben Folkes and Josh Bohannon as well. We'll hear from Butch in a minute about the opportunities out there for English spinners in April. But you can see why teams insist on their spin options being able to bat, especially at this time of the year. Matt Parkinson did take a third innings fifer, but that was a Surrey sought quick runs ahead of the declaration. Ben, with Surrey in particular, last season it was very interesting that Jacks was their main spinner, but he's now not playing, and Cam Steele, who's not got a great first-class record, he's still in the team ahead of Verdi, who was hardly talked about a few years ago, and Dan Moriarty, who was a favourite of Rob Key 2 years ago before he got the England job.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the difficulties with talking about this is that you see so little of these spinners. Like it's genuinely like trying to spot a rare bird or something. That you can almost, it's so difficult to talk about. Like we have no idea really what kind of state Moriarty or Verdi's bowling is in. You kind of hear whispers here and there. You get to see a little bit in practice. Maybe you put on a second 11 stream or something. But really, you have no idea how good these guys are. And then when they get a go, invariably it's either in conditions which are really tough for spinners to bowl in, which is really tough when you're not getting to bowl much to begin with, or you're getting one game a season and it's like a raging turner, and all of a sudden you go from being not involved in the squad at all to having to be the main man for like one game, and it's a really tough thing to do. And you can say to, like, I mean, Verdi especially was so highly rated, and he played such a key part for Surrey at certain times, and is now so far on the fringes that you wondered, does this guy need to go somewhere else, to somewhere he can be more of the main man? But then where is that really? I mean, Somerset, for a time would be maybe somewhere where spinners would look to go, and yet now it's not the turning paradise it once was. And now, and also back when it was, spinners who did well there, okay, Bess and Leach did get called up for England, but their records would be looked at with a bit of like a sort of a raised eyebrow, saying, are they that good? There's kind of almost no way to win if you're a young player. And I don't know how you go about sort of building the skills to be a test match spinner, because the tricky thing is that from Surrey's point of view, and they're coached by Gareth Batty, who is a champion of spin bowling, at least he was in his playing days, and is now, they basically haven't picked a specialist spinner for about 2 years almost, and yet it totally makes sense they don't. I mean, Will Jacks did exactly the role they wanted him to last summer. I think he bowled the third most overs of anyone, averaged 50 with the bat, and averaged about 50 with the ball as well. And yet that was what Surrey needed, because they realised that if you can bat deep, then that's what's going to win them games. It's what they've gone with from Cameron Steele. So from a competitive point of view, and we want the County Championship to be a competitive thing first and foremost, there's no blaming Surrey for what they're doing, and yet I don't really know where that leaves young spinners trying to make it in the game. Dan Senior, who's Wisden's social editor had a good idea that just as they do with fast bowlers, they almost do this so they don't get picked so much. They put them on pace bowling development contracts, but there should just be spin bowling development contracts basically, and you almost silo off these spinners, maybe get them off up to Loughborough or wherever it may be, and get them under the tutelage of a proper spin coach all year round. And that's actually how you're going to like groom young spinners, because the current system basically isn't working for it, I guess.
There was someone told me kind of an anecdote about Ollie Rayner, and the person who was telling it to me was a parent, and their kid was an off spinner, and they're down by the boundaries edge of a county game or whatever, and the parent kind of shoos off their child, like, oh, that's Ollie Rayner, go and have a chat. And the kid goes and gets the autograph, and the parent's like, go on then, ask him for some advice. And he goes like, come on, my son's a young off spinner, like what should he do? And Ollie Rayner just goes, oh, you want to be an off spinner, do you? Learn to bat. Like that's the reality of the kind of current day and age. And as Ben's saying, if you were Surrey, why wouldn't you have someone who can bowl a bit and score you 140 at 7, rather than have Amar Verdi at 11 knock everyone up a position in the order? I think the thing with Verdi is the idea was he had the kind of best individual off break, but was he kind of able to hold? Did he have the skill set of a red ball spinner over time? Like I think he went to Somerset for a game last year. I got the card here, like 25 overs, 0 for 121. Like, but at the same time, like if Rehan Ahmed's come through, if you're good enough, I think England are very proactive in picking you. So I don't think I'm not concerned from a kind of a holistic point of view of are people coming through if Moriarty and Verdi aren't playing, because Surrey are doing very well and have literally developed England's potentially next second spinner in Will Jacks.
And I guess also, if looking from an England point of view, you only need one, right? So you don't care if like most counties don't have a spinner, because as long as one or two counties have a really good one, then you pick one as your first choice spinner most time, and then when you get to India, you also pick the other one, and that's kind of fine.
Yeah, I think Jack Leach might just play for England forever, as far as I can tell. Like, he's just fine.
Yeah.
You pick him, you're like, all right, that's okay. Like, kind of one Leach in the hand's worth kind of like 2 Parkinsons in the bush. They're like, what? There's no one's that much better than you. So if we just plugged you in, you're going to get 2 for 80 off 27 overs. All right.
Yeah, I guess on the Rehan comment, he isn't a product of the county championship. He played for England after a couple of games, basically. So yeah, it's interesting. I do find it. I think it's a bit of a shame that the spinners aren't evenly spread out across the 18 counties. So Leicestershire, who didn't win a single game last season, have Rehan Ahmed, who's got a Test match 5 for at the age of 18, and then Callum Parkinson, who's the leading English leading English spinner 2 years ago, doesn't get a game because Rehan's come through. It's like, you should spread them out a little bit more evenly. Let's go to Butch to hear his views on the development of young English spinners. Our YouTube audience will be able to tell that Mark's not where he normally is for when we do these calls. But it wasn't as low scoring a first set of games that it could have been for a round starting on the 6th of April, especially with how much the weather affected preparation. I wanted to pick your brains, though, on what it might be like to be a spinner at the moment. Why is it harder to bowl spin this early in April than it is in the middle of the summer?
Well, there's lots of factors, really. First and foremost, the seamers are supposed to have hold sway, be most effective at this time of year. So captains naturally will turn more to their seam bowlers at at pivotal points of play, or basically just because the conditions say that is going to be more effective than spin. On a conditions level, because the pitches have got that much more moisture in them, or there's more live grass on them, there is no no grip or turn for them. Meaning that it's much harder to prize batters out or to stop them from being able to take liberties, because you're not getting any side spin on the ball. And thirdly, I guess, is just temperature. You notice how your fingers don't work so well doing up buttons on a coat or something when the temperatures are cool. Imagine trying to spin a hard lump of shiny leather when your fingers are frozen. Not easy. So all of those factors combined mean that it's unlikely that spinners will have much of an effect at early season. Look, that's always been the case. Whether you started, remember starting sort of the last week of April back in the early part of my career, And the same was still the case, really. And the only spinners really that actually managed to get anything done, or were actually of much use to captains and teams at those, were those that had a really fabulous command of where they were landing the ball, and the amount of different ways they were able to get it there. Once the ball lands, there's not much you can do, particularly if there is no spin. But your command of line and length, your command of flight has to be absolutely exquisite at that time of the year in order to be able to be of use enough to stay on in a spell for your captain, perhaps to rest and rotate the seam bowlers, or maybe even just nick the odd wicket here and there. So it's not an easy task at that time of the year for anybody, but particularly if you're not a master in terms of your control of line and length of the ball.
I guess it's a circular problem in a way, because in order to develop that command, you need to play as much as possible. And I guess that at this point in the year, a specialist spinner is arguably not really needed for counties. I mean, England go to India next winter, and last time they went there, they took 4 young spinners either in the squad or on tour as reserves. Don Best, Matt Parkinson, Amar Verdi and Mason Crane. 2 years on, Best hasn't been in an England squad for a while. Parkinson has had a tough few months and he's no longer guaranteed a spot in the Lancashire 11. Verdi is 4th choice spinner at Surrey. Mason Crane doesn't play in the Championship for Hampshire. You can see why, at Surrey, Gareth Batty, of all people, puts all-rounders like Will Jackson, Cam Steele ahead of Dan Moriarty and Amar Verdi. It's just quite hard for spinners to get that game time almost. At Leicestershire, Callum Parkinson was the leading English wicket taker a couple of years ago. He's not on the side because of Rehan Ahmed. It's just quite difficult for those talented young spinners who are identified at a young age to actually get the game time in order to develop that control that you talk about.
Yeah, it is pretty brutal. The opportunities that these guys have available to them outside of the English summer, however, mean that again, I was going to stress the idea that the control and the ability to be able to land the ball exactly where you want it to is something that is within your control, that you could do indoors. Obviously game time very important and all those types of things, but having that sort of the mastery over what the ball is going to do after it leaves your hand is something that you can take on board and make better, whether you're playing in April or not, or whether you're bowling much in April or not. And go back to the opportunities, in the winter times, the amount of cricket that is available for people to play, whether they go to India for spin clinics, whether they play grade cricket in Australia or New Zealand, whatever it is that you can do in order to have the ball in your hand 12 months of the year, are all things that you can have in your, because it's personal. It's a brutal business being a spin bowler, a bit like being, the only wicket keeper in the side. There's only one of you most of the time. And so therefore your standards for yourself have to be unbelievably high in order to take advantage of any opportunity that might come your way. Structurally, the time of year is not great. I don't think it's great for anybody, but that unfortunately is where we are. What then happens later on in terms of development of these players is I get the feeling that quite often these guys are kind of fast tracked before they're ready, and what happens is that their confidence gets dented, not because they haven't worked hard enough, but because they weren't quite ready in the first place. They then take a huge hit in terms of their confidence. We've seen it with spinners. We've seen it with Don Best. The fact that you can get the yips. Certain nasty gremlins will appear in the mind, which then make it very difficult for the body to do what you want it to do. And hence why we see a lot of guys who get brought in early as sort of like the next big thing, then find it very, very difficult for themselves over a 2 or 3 year period before they mature and then get more of a mastery of what they're up to.
I just trying to understand, going back to your generation. I think that there were more players who did pretty well, more spinners who did pretty well in international cricket in your era. Swan, Panesar towards the end, Giles and Tufnell. How do you think those guys got to that position to be reliable at international level?
Well, Swan and Panesar is a really good example, actually, of two guys who by the time they got their international chances were that little bit older. And they played, Northamptonshire was, a terrific place to bowl spin for quite a long period of time at the turn of the century. They'd leave grass on in the middle and shave the ends and try and bring the spinners into the game that way. but I mean, Swan is an example. I was going to bring him up anyway because one of the things I get regular phone calls and emails from Pat Pocock. Took over 1,000 first-class wickets for Surrey, played for England. Didn't have a terrific record as a Test bowler, but had a fabulous first-class record. Sort of bemoaning the lack of specialist knowledge when it comes to coaching spin. And that's an area that I think is a massive problem. I mean, Graham Swan has been trying to get himself in and around sort of England spin bowlers ever since his retirement. And, only Swanee will know what the reasons why that they've not been quite so keen to have him about on a regular basis. But having genuine expertise in what is a very, very high specialist area of the game is something that we've been very, very slow to bring in. You think of the work that people like Bruce French have done over the years with England's keepers, turning batter keepers into brilliant wicket keepers because of the close proximity to somebody that really understands the art. And I don't think we've ever taken spin that seriously. And so therefore the people who do have the knowledge, people who are high quality coaches, whether they come from overseas or whether they come from within our system, and that's why I bring up somebody like Swanee. These guys should be employed on the payroll and doing good work with all of these young talents because there is absolutely no reason why spin is still very popular. Kids want to bowl it. They want to become great leggies. They want to bowl doozers, whatever it might want to be. But what they don't have access to often enough is people who really, really understand the art, understand the mental side of it, and can sort of mentor these guys and turn them into fabulous bowlers. And then the last part of it is, are you as driven as somebody like Graham Swan or Monty Panesar? It always comes back to you as a personally in terms of how far you're willing to go, how much of a change you're willing to make, or how much work you're willing to put in. It's very difficult to escape that side of it too.
Well, I'm sure that plenty of young English spinners would probably prefer to be bowling where you are at the moment with the palm trees in the background than out in the cold in a county championship in April. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week.
Hand warmers out there, boys.
Make live streaming cricket a breeze. Are you or your club looking to live stream your cricket matches this season? If so, look no further than Sport Radar's Frogbox streaming kit to turn your fixtures into a professional quality broadcast. Frogbox is the all-in-one streaming kit that makes broadcasting live cricket accessible and affordable for clubs, schools and leagues. Designed for recreational cricket, the Frogbox solution is the lightweight, portable and affordable product designed for clubs of all levels. Integrated with the Play Cricket Scorer app, all you need to do on match day is set up the portable video capture kit and live score the match on the app. The automated technology will take care of the rest. Stream to YouTube with high quality graphics, generate highlights of your greatest moments and connect with your community like never before. Frogbox professionally showcases cricket at any level while offering new revenue and fan engagement opportunities for clubs. The automated graphics package has multiple displays and advertising opportunities available, engaging the end user and delivering high quality visibility for your corporate partners. Capture those special moments with automated highlight generation and join the streaming revolution with Sport Radar's Frogbox. Visit their website www.frogbox.live for further information and start reimagining the digital matchday experience this season. When we were doing the pre-season preview last week, I really didn't want to discount Hampshire and Essex, even though they might not have the strongest batting lineups around, partly because in rounds like this, when there aren't too many results, they're the best placed team to get them. So Hampshire beat Notts in a fairly low-scoring game, and Essex beat Middlesex in a similar game at Lords. On Hampshire, Mohammed Abbas was superb. He took a 6 for in the first innings. He averages less than 17 since joining Hampshire last year. And remember, last year was supposed to be a particularly high-scoring season. Cam, you're out there in Pakistan for the Test series. Given some of the bowlers picked ahead of Abbas for Pakistan in recent times, is he not unlucky not to have played Test cricket more recently?
Yes. So Pakistan's selection for the Pakistan series was kind of in spite of themselves, because if everyone remembers, we played on these really flat wickets. There was the Rawalpindi track, and they picked a lad called Muhammad Ali, and he bowled 70-mile-an-hour seamers. And I remember when the first time I saw him, he was opening the bowling, and you're kind of ready for this kind of big boy off a long run, kind of how quick is it going to be? And he was just so slow. You're like, what is going on here? And he was picked off the basis of, in the domestic competition, they've been playing on green tops, And then for the test series, they took all the grass off and playing on these flat tracks. So there was space for Mohamed Abbas to be in that kind of team. It wasn't like they opted for different bowlers and opted for raw pace. I got forwarded quite a fun anecdote about Mohamed Abbas, which was on WhatsApp, so it's 100% true and gospel and must be taken as such. But apparently, I don't know, journalistically, I don't know if this is amazing, but it's fine. We'll carry on.
I'm really looking forward to this.
Part of his deal at Hampshire is he's got like the premier penthouse suites in the Hilton that overlooks the ground, basically.
That's great.
And
I already love this anecdote.
yeah. And so Man City were playing Southampton away last week, and Man City was staying in the Hilton, and City put in a request if Pep Guardiola could take Abbas's suite off him for like the 2 nights, whatever.
Top and tail.
And Hampshire went, no, that's Mo Abbas's suite. Pep, you go down the hallway, mate. So that's the regard he's held there. If it's true, no idea, but I want it to be. Doesn't answer the question about whether he should be playing Test cricket, but
Yeah, I like the idea that Pep Guardiola would have had to have someone explain to him who Mohamed Abbas is. Like, mate, he averages less than 17 in the county championship recently.
No guarantee Abbas knows who Pep Guardiola is. I think.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, also the thing with him as well is he is just so accurate that actually, almost a bit like Anderson on flat pitch. Okay, I'm not putting Abbas in quite the same bracket, but the way that Anderson, when he's not in the game, you at least know it's almost like a spinner. Like he's not going to go for any runs, and Abbas can do that. So yeah, it is just odd. I guess they. So one thing, just I don't feel it needs to defend Muhammad Ali too strongly, but I spoke to Paul Nixon, who was his coach for a bit last winter, and saying that quite a lot of the players got quite a raw deal coming into that series because of how grueling Pakistan's first class system is. It's basically like 4 days on, 2 days off for
So it's
about
even
6
worse
weeks.
than what it is here. Okay.
So and I think Muhammad Ali had bowled almost the most overs out of anyone. So came there and was basically like a husk almost, and then turns up to Rawalpindi. So there's no guarantee that Abbas would have been in the same sort of condition as well. But yeah, I mean he's a brilliant bowler, and I'm sure Hampshire will be quite happy if Pakistan stay away for the time being.
And Ben, it was a very good week for a similar type of seamer, Jamie Porter. He took 9 wickets in Essex's win at Lords. Middlesex were 4 for 4 in their first innings, with all those 4 runs coming from no balls, and then they were 4 for 2 in the second innings. Porter's not been quite at his best in recent years, so it was nice to see him return to what we know he could produce and did produce for a very long time.
Yeah, and these are the standards you have to compete with. Like when you're talking about Abbas averaging, what was it, just under 17, and Sam Cook has been at that same sort of level. And I think that's like it's a weird situation if you're a very good county seamer, where you can come out with numbers that in any other context would be excellent, and yet you can be a bit disappointed with yourself. He spoke in 2020, I think this was with the context of him having not been picked in that England 55-man training group, and saying that, well, last year I picked up 49 wickets, which is one of the most in the country, but I didn't feel like I bowled that well. And that's the odd thing, is that you play so much cricket, and if you're fit enough, you'll take lots of wickets, and also the ball is sometimes, the pitches are helpful enough that you can just take wickets by not doing a huge amount. I think the feeling from this game was that Porter was absolutely back at his best, and at the level that made him an England contender back in 2018. And Middlesex lost 6 wickets for 8 runs across the 2 first innings, and there wasn't a loose shot in there. It just seemed like excellent bowling from Porter and from Cook, and then obviously Harmer carries it on. And if Porter is he's had a few years where his numbers look good, but the Essex had those other bowlers who have out-bowled him. But if he is back to that level, then they're going to be really, really hard to beat, because those 2 can actually take wickets anywhere. Although they're very good when it's helping them, they can do it in any sort of conditions.
And just on Essex's chances, Dan Lawrence scored 100 in the first innings, and he had a pretty quiet year in the county championship last year, and really good 100 here on not the easiest wicket in the world to bat on. He also hit what I think is not only a contender for shot of the season, but I actually don't think it's going to get beat over the course of the summer, which I know is a big claim for April the 12th, but I'm going to stick by it. I don't think the highlight of the individual highlight of the shot currently exists online. It was on the county championship Instagram story for 24 hours, but it's no longer there. But basically, Lawrence came down the wicket and hit Toby Rowland-Jones over extra cover for 6, but the ball was so far away from his body, he did really well to adjust last minute. to whack it over the extra cover boundary. It'd be an interesting summer for Lawrence. Cam, he was in the New Zealand squad, kind of to the surprise of a lot of people. And you wonder, with the rise of Will Jacks, you can kind of imagine Lawrence. He averages 36 in first class cricket, but that's also what Ben Stokes averages in everything. Like you can imagine Lawrence almost reinventing himself down the line, not as a number 4 batter, that potentially somebody bats 6 or 7, bowls a bit of off spin.
Well, England have the reason Lawrence is still in contention is England have kind of reversed that old cliche of it's not how, it's how many. For them, it very much is it's how as well as, and how many doesn't matter as much, basically. Yeah. And Lawrence, Stuart Broad actually spoke about him just kind of at a complete tangent during one of his press conferences, talking about the environment. He said Lawrence was back in the group, and I think the phrase he used was his eyes were on Stokes and just looking around being like, this is amazing. This is so much fun to be a part of. I really want to play Test cricket for England. I think that's part of what kind of the whole McCullum-Stokes mantra is they want to make it a really desirable kind of like, almost, I don't mean boys club in the traditional sense, although maybe I do. Like, they want to make it almost a closed shop where it's like, if you play for us, you get all these perks and it's amazing. And so I think it's maybe it's too simplistic to put 1 and 2 together and say Lawrence had that experience in New Zealand and went, I desperately want to be a part of this. And then first innings, first match back, gets 100. But it's quite a convenient kind of connection to make. And especially with, when you mentioned that shot, the ball before, I think it'd been an LBW appeal, like quite close. And just kind of, I'm so interested by these players, like their thought process about when to kind of launch these attacks. And Joe Root did it with, because you remember Root got in trouble for, he'd go out reverse scooping basically. And he spoke about 2 different ways of when he chose to play it. So the first one was New Zealand to hang the ball outside off stump. So the only way, they're not challenging my stumps, I can have a go at it. And the only way I can get out is if I glove it and get caught, which is what happened. And the second one he did, which is kind of made me think of Lawrence in this instance, was he said, I was worried I was going to nick off and they'd slips in place and I wanted them to get rid of a slip and I wanted them to put in a third man. So I thought if I reverse scoop it for 6, they'll have to lose a slip basically. And that kind of uber aggression to then kind of put the emphasis back on the bowler. Because if you look at that innings, his strike rate wasn't particularly high. And then just out of the blue, he goes, I reckon I'm going to run at him and put him over extra actually. And that is that kind of, it is that how that England are looking for, because he was back in the Test squad having not played any cricket. So I wonder whether it was almost a selection of, these are the guys we like and see potential in, let's get him back in, kind of give him a bit of a taster of it. And well, so far it seems to be working.
Yeah, and he had a pretty good tour of West Indies, which was the last series before Stokes took up the captaincy. And I'm sure that Lawrence would have impressed Stokes personally.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that 91, didn't we, in Barbados, as did you, Cam.
Much so.
And obviously the heartbreaking last over dismissal. But now that wouldn't matter. Now they'd sort of laugh it off and Stokes would be sort of, giving him a noogie or whatever at the end of the day. To be honest, I don't know if he'll invent himself as an all-rounder. And obviously I doubt there's going to be a vacancy for a specialist bat in that top 6 for a while, or at least below in the middle order. But also, England have an all-rounder and a captain who has significant injury troubles. I would be actually quite surprised if they get through the summer with the top 6 the same in all 6 Test matches, just because of how things have gone with Stokes in his career so far. And at this point, I think Lawrence pretty much is the next man in that top 6. I mean, Jacks is probably not quite at that level yet. So actually, if Lawrence can just do enough to keep himself at the front of that queue, then there is a chance he plays some Ashes cricket this summer, because injuries happen, as we see. It can be a long-standing knee thing, or it can be, a freak thing on a golf course.
The Somerset Warwickshire game ended in a draw after the first day was washed out about an hour or so before the scheduled start. There were hundreds for Warwickshire through Sam Hain and Alex Davies. Not a huge load of runs from Somerset's new look top order, with Sean Dixon, Cam Bancroft and Tom Kohler-Cadmore added to the top 4. There was a win for Kent at home to Northants. They won the toss, sent Northants in and bowled them out for 117. Zach Crawley scored an important 91. And then after Rob Keogh and Gareth Berg frustrated Kent in the 3rd innings, Ben Compton scored a 4th innings 100 to see Kent home. They're a fascinating opening pair, Crawley and Compton. Crawley is the man who plays for England, easy on the eye, without the numbers to quite back up the talent yet. Compton is the guy who waited an age for a domestic opportunity and he's racking up obscene numbers. He averages 58 in first-class cricket. I know that he's played a fair bit in Zimbabwe, but that is quite something. And Ben, you thought the way that Crawley went about his 91, which was really, really important on the context of the game, was quite interesting.
Yeah, well, so that 91, it wasn't just a 91, which obviously I can feel that, the Crawley detractors screaming, saying like, how can you be talking about a guy's 91, when all the evidence we have. But it was a 91 when no one else in the first innings of the game made it to 40, I think. It was also one made, you look at the eventual strike rate and it's, hovering around 50. But he was 8 or 43 at one point. He really got through the new ball, and then he took on the bowlers thereafter. Which and at that point you're thinking like, okay, like he said all this stuff about my defense is as good as anyone's. I don't need to work on my defense. I need to basically just keep doing the same thing. But maybe something has actually clicked here. There have been just hints that there is this other player in there, the guy who can get through the new ball and then can flourish. And again, if you're Dom Sibley listening to this, you're thinking like, how can you still be talking about his 30 odd at Old Trafford last summer when I played loads of those types of innings for England and never got the the credit maybe I was due for them. But I think with Crawley there is the upside that if he gets through that period, he can be the guy that then kicks England on. Then you see his dismissal in the second innings when I can't remember who the bowler was. Chris Tremaine, yeah. And it's okay. There's a chase, but the run rate isn't an issue. And it's the second over of the innings, I think, and he comes down and plays one of those sort of like weirdly angled batted shots, those drives, and it goes through the gate and it bowls it. And you're thinking like, you just did it in the first innings, and it almost feels like sometimes there's the pressure builds and the pressure builds, and then he bats properly and does well. And then it's almost like an I told you so innings, but like, not to sound too much like Roy Keane, but that's his job, like you can't just, if I came into work and did nothing 4 days out of 5, and then the 5th day I was like, oh, fine, stop complaining, I'll do some work today. And then was like, see, it's not that, it's that like the facing the new ball is always going to be hard, and you might well always have to battle through it. And the signs were there in the first innings that he could do it, and I guess it will just be following it over the season.
There have been signs in his Test career as well. I think I go back to it a lot, but the innings that have most impressed me, other than the 267, obviously, are actually the innings where he's knuckled down through quite difficult periods. So he has scored a very normal opening bat Test 100 against West Indies last year. That the way he started in that innings against South Africa, that was really old-fashioned Test match opening batting, getting through a really difficult new ball spell late on the first day against a really good attack.
I can't believe Ben's been nice. I thought I was losing my mind. Ben was being really nice about Zach Crawley, and we came back around, and I was like, here we go, I'm home.
Just what was your perspective of his tour of New Zealand? Because he had a really odd tour where it seemed quite, I guess, premeditated almost.
The rules are just different for him. It's because his cover drive, it is so nice, and I feel it's such like a private school indoor net cover drive, and I love it, and it annoys me so much. But like I was just looking at the card at Mount Maunganui. He got, what did he get? He got 28 off 39, and it was in that evening session. He's got 28 runs, and by all the reports are saying he goes back in the dressing room, massive slaps on the back, mate, amazing, did your job. Like, they were 20 for 3 last night, we're 50 for 1. And it's like these are, they're kind of bending the rules of like fabric physics to kind of who they want it to fit. And he's given these interviews of like, I want to be an entertainer, my defense is good enough. Like he's like really bullish, and they're bullish about him. It's a strange win, because basically, however you look at Zach Crawley's numbers, you just take any cross section of innings, he just always averages 30. It's always the same. And I'll be interested. Do you want to know my hot take for the summer?
Go on.
I think you've got to drop Crawley. He is the one who has to go.
At what point do you think? Do you think before the summer starts, or are you saying what you think will happen, or what you think should go?
So Bairstow in. I think you want to move it around as little as possible. You're not going to move Pope from 3. You don't want to move Root from 4. Brook and Bairstow 5 and 6. Folks at 7. Stokes.
Yeah, I think this as well. I mean, so you're clearly not listening to every podcast whilst you're abroad. But that's what I think. That's what I think. Phil made a really interesting point, not on the podcast, about an insight into what McCullum will think about opening the batting base in his own career. McCullum basically just went, whilst his captain decided, I'll open. And, a player like McCullum, really not that far away from what Stokes is like skill set wise, if he opened the batting and did a really good job at it, I think there'll be conversations being had about Stokes's how Stokes could do it. I guess the only thing is with Stokes' knee, they don't want to put too much pressure on it. We'll get to the Stokes interview he did with Nasser Hussain the other day in a second, but Stokes talked about really wanting to be that fourth seamer for the side as well. So maybe that is something that makes that a bit less likely.
But against that, Stokes is also talking about, and this is kind of when it started going in my mind, like, oh, is this actually a thing? He's talking about wanting to be this kind of sacrificial leader. He's like, he speaks about, I don't really want to play for myself anymore. I'm not bothered about that. I'm not bothered about my average. I want to kind of enhance the careers of others. And so if in the current shape of the England team, there is a role that if it's not going to be Crawley, a square peg has to go into a round hole. And that fits the rhetoric of what Stokes is saying. And also this idea of like Crawley being backed to the hilt, the kind of, I keep on using this word, the kind of rhetoric around Crawley and Bairstow has dulled in both directions. Like Bairstow was 100% in ahead of the Pakistan series, and after New Zealand, McCullum goes, oh, well, like we'll see what happens. And the same with Crawley. We back him all the way. Well, you can back someone all the way and not pick them. You can still say, we think you are the 7th best batter in the country and we think you're amazing, but there's just not space for you. Like I don't think Crawley, for all his backing so far, is guaranteed a place in the side. I really, really don't think that's the case.
Moving on to that Stokes interview, some absolute gold in it. He was asked by Nasser Hussain explicitly, if England are 2-1 up in the series and 300 runs ahead with a couple of sessions to go on the final day, would you declare? Stokes said yes. He also very bullishly talked about how he wants fast and flat pitches because they want to score quickly, which, I think those are the kind of pitches Australia will want to play on as well. Ben, what do you think about that when you saw the interview?
I don't think any aspect of it surprised me, really. Obviously, the declaration thing is the most eye-catching, I suppose. But I guess, I mean, this is just what the rules are now. But I also think that it's, look, if you're an England fan, the perspective I always try and keep in mind that there obviously are England fans, and we saw in the people talking about that thing on social media, there are England fans who won't want England to do that. Like, sure, entertainment is great, but it's the Ashes and you win the Ashes, and that's the most important thing. But this Stokes talking like this, even saying that, like, this isn't Stokes declaring, this is Stokes saying he will declare. This makes it more likely that England will win the Ashes, because the worst thing that can happen in the Ashes series is you're really worried about losing it. So you lose the first game and all of a sudden you've lost it 5-0. And the main thing, well, not the main thing, but a key thing that England's new approach does is it means that one loss will more rarely become 2 losses, because you can bounce back from it much more easily because you don't care that it's happened, basically. That will be hard to take in the moment for England fans who, when a team loses, they want to see, gnashing of teeth and letting of blood and openers being, thrown on the scrap heap and that sort of thing. But in the long term, this will lead to England winning more games of cricket. And I guess we'll see what happens if in this mythical scenario, England... I mean, also, for England to be 2-1 up, they'll have already had to draw a game, and that can't happen. So I think we might not have to worry about this one.
Cam, what did you make of it?
You just can't argue with it, can you? Like, he's saying 2 + 2 is 5, and we're like, all right. like, what do you want me to say? You can't form a coherent argument against that. You're like, well... He's like, we want to win everything. And it's like, well, no, you've won the series in that scenario. It's like, no, we want to win the game. It's like, but that doesn't... Okay. But it's just, I mean, it's this kind of power of personality that means we've all forgiven the fact that they lost by 1 run in Wellington. Like, that was one of the worst Test match losses of all time. It was like catastrophic. And me included was like, God, that was fun. That was amazing. And like, they declared they enforced the follow-on for no particular reason. They enforced the follow-on because it was the fastest way to win. I asked McCullum that after the series. I was like, did you enforce the follow-on because you thought it was the best way to win, or because it was the fastest way to win? And he's like, oh, no. We thought it was probably the best way to win, just like the way the pitch was moving, extracting a bit of like seam. And you're like, no, shut up. Like, no, like, it's just a hyper-aggressive...
Is that what you said to Brendan McCullum?
Those are actually my exact words. Then you go back through the transcript. This is it's always the hyper-aggressive option, and it's that kind of blurring of best and fastest, and England kind of for them, like, quantity is quality. Like, the faster it is, the bigger it is, the better it is, the more exciting it is. And you can't back down from that mantra. And because it's so powerful, you just can't disagree with it.
It's a good point, because you're entirely right that actually England batting on would have made a victory more likely, not less likely. There are some decisions which make your odds of defeat less likely, but also your odds of victory less likely, and this wasn't one of them. And yet, in that interview that Stokes is with Nasser, that match with New Zealand isn't mentioned. Like, can you imagine, like, at any other point in history, as you say, you played a classic test, but you've lost from like what should be such a position of strength.
Position.
Yeah. And the question, like, it's not even a question of how will you bounce back from this. It's like, well, we've already seen that you've kind of, you're out on the outfield smiling, even if they were slightly sort of, I don't know. Did you feel there were slightly forced smiles from Stokes and McCullum with in the presentation?
I don't think so. I genuinely think they don't care, but in like a good way. They're just like, let's just have fun, and that is kind of going back to the kind of Dan Lawrence example. But it was just, I didn't believe when they said like Jimmy was smiling. I was like, I think you'd be like gutted, and like in that moment you really want to win. Like Folkes was gutted as well. Folkes was 8 runs away from locking himself in for the Ashes basically. But to go back to the whole like the enforcing the follow on, going into the game there was debates over whether the seamers were fit. It's back-to-back test matches. You got the whole kind of Broad Anderson, they're both 78 million years old. And then you enforce the follow on, they've spent 210 overs out in the field. Like, you can say, oh, it's great for the game, etc. But if you're Jimmy Anderson or Stuart Broad, you probably look back on it and you go, I actually probably would have preferred to not do that and risk XYZ injury. I've got myself into a rabbit hole there.
No, it was interesting.
And just one thing on, because that was the other thing as well, I thought, was with the selection for it. Like, they didn't pick Ollie Stone, but that was one thing in this interview, was trying to glean, because Stokes says, I think I've got my 11 locked in for the first game of the Ashes. But then as he talks on Rose, he hasn't quite. Like, Bairstow, there's still a question over Bairstow. And he's saying that I think if they get the fast flat wickets they want, they will go with 2 seamers, 2 of Robinson, Broad and Anderson, I guess, and 1 of Archer, Stone or Wood. But we don't, it could rain for 2 weeks in the lead up to a series, and then you don't get the pitch that you want. So that was just interesting, just trying to work out what team England will actually go in with. I think that would be their ideal bowling combination, but it will depend. I think
that was my interpretation of that. When he says he knows what my team is, I think he knows what the balance he wants is, not the personnel. Because in theory, having Anderson, Broad, Wood as your 3 seamers is kind of the same as having Anderson, Robinson, Archer. Like, that's the same makeup of like having your kind of line and length seamers and your one kind of rocket man, basically.
Well, still 2 months of Ashes build up to go. The Wisden shop has had a long-awaited restock of their cricket ball leather wallets made from premium Italian leather. The Wisden wallet is perfect for that cricket fan in your life. The touch and feel of the premium quality Italian leather and the distinctive cricket ball seam stitching are designed to give a tangible, everyday reminder of the game we love. Exclusively available at wisden.com/shop. As mentioned in the intro, a great win for Leicestershire over Yorkshire. It's their first win at Headingley since 1910. Leicestershire didn't win a single county championship game in 2022, and it was an amazing victory. Yorkshire scored 517 in the first innings, and a big partnership between Peter Handscomb and Rehan Ahmed helped Leicestershire avoid the follow-on. Yorkshire's declaration wasn't even that bold in the third innings. In the end, they left Leicestershire needing 389, pretty much 4.5 and over, which Leicestershire managed to chase down on that pretty flat final day wicket. Here is Peter Handscomb on that win, but also what it's like to bat with and keep wicket to Rehan Ahmed. Thanks for joining us, Pete. How are you feeling after that win, chasing 400 against the title favourites on the last day? That's some way to start the season.
Yeah, it was. It was an impressive win, but what I think was the best thing about it was that there were contributions from everyone, both with bat and ball, throughout the whole game. So it was really exciting to see sort of everyone contribute to such an impressive win.
What was the chat like in the dressing room before you guys went out to bat? Was there anything from Lewis or Paul about going for the win, or was it just go out and play your natural games?
It sort of took the win we took the win out of our mind a little bit and just said, let's just bat normally. The ball's there to hit, then you hit it. Otherwise, it's just normal cricket. And then we could always reassess. We had, I think it was 14 overs maybe before lunch, so we had a chance to see how we were positioned after that, and then we could reassess. We were in a good position, so that meant that next session we could see what happened there, and Colin and Rishi batted beautifully there and got us into a position where the win was possible in that last session. And then the conversation started happening around that last session. How do we go about this? What can we chase it in the final 10 overs? What's sort of the plan? And we sort of formulated something, and it pretty much worked out pretty well.
And then when the second new ball came with 5 or so overs left, obviously that was an opportunity for Yorkshire to win the game as well, to make a breakthrough as well. They're only 4 wickets away from a win themselves. Did you sense that was also an opportunity for you guys to attack against that newer and harder ball?
Yeah, that was something we were speaking about out there, is that was going to be probably the critical part of the chase in the end. They were going to take the new ball to try and create a few wickets and hopefully move the ball around a little bit more. But by also selecting a harder ball, it was going to open up some scoring shots. So if we still trusted our process and trusted the way that we were batting, then hopefully a few scoring shots would open up, and that would get us close to the target that we wanted.
Obviously Chris Wright was brilliant at the end as well. I just want to go back to the first innings. You put on a massive stand with Rehan Ahmed. He's obviously made headlines with his bowling over the winter, but how impressed were you with his batting? What does he do so well for someone who's only 18?
He's got a lot of confidence, which is a good thing to have as a young player, but also as a leg spinner. But with his batting, he just came out and he just played his natural game. And I think that was what was really impressive, is that he wasn't cluttered. He wasn't worried about what was going on. He knew where he could score. He understood his process and how he was going about it, and stayed calm while he was out there and doing it. So it was impressive being up the other end and watching some of the shots that he can play. He was square driving a few sort of off the back foot, and then he could walk down and drive it, through the onside as well. So it's definitely an exciting talent coming through.
And what's he like to keep wicket to? Obviously, not many 18-year-olds take 5 wicket hauls, especially leg spinners in Test cricket. So we're all very excited about him here in England.
Yeah, no, it was nice. It was nice keeping to him. He got into a really, really nice rhythm there, especially in the second innings, where it felt like he started to land it exactly where he wanted, and it's an impressive feat by any leg spinner, let alone an 18-year-old leg spinner. So yeah, he's exciting, and he'll just keep going strength to strength. The more he plays and the more games he gets under his belt and a bit more experience. So no, it's exciting to see what he'll do this year.
And just on your wicket keeping, is that something that you've asked to do at Leicestershire with a view to potentially doing it down the line in international cricket maybe? I saw you weren't keeping for Victoria in the Australian summer, so is that just something you want to do more of?
That was something that Leicester asked if I was willing to do, and throughout my career I've always done a bit of keeping here and there, predominantly white ball, but in the last Test tour of India, if Alex Carey had gone down the morning of a game, then I was going to be the one that was going to put the gloves on over there. So it's definitely a good thing to have another string to my bow, but first and foremost, I've got to be making runs and contributing to wins with the bat, and doing everything right with the bat. And then if the gloves can help me get onto a tour as a backup wicketkeeper, or just help a bit of squad balance like it is here at Leicester, then yeah, I'm happy to put them on.
I know it's early days, but how are you enjoying your time at Leicestershire so far? Because obviously it wasn't that long before the start of the season that Abdullah Shafiq was initially going to come over, that you got your deal as well.
Yeah, no, loving it here so far. It obviously helps when you start with such a good win. But no, it's been very, very welcoming. The squad are a good bunch of lads, and the coaching staff have gone above and beyond to make sure that I've been ready with both bat and gloves. So no, I can't fault what Leicester are trying to do here and how they've helped me even just in those 3 days before the first game.
Well, cheers for your time, Peter, and best of luck with the rest of your stint at Leicestershire.
Beauty. Thank you, mate.
Ben, we had a few comments from listeners last week saying that we gave Yorkshire too easy a ride on last week's pod. It looks like we did. I know that there's a good attack on paper and it's a decent batting lineup, and there aren't really any standout sides elsewhere in the division, but that's not a result of a team that looks like it's going to run away with the title.
No, it's. I guess you can look at their attack from a couple different perspectives, I suppose. I mean, you've got Ben Code in that sort of Sam Cook bracket, averages 20. You've got Jordan Thompson, who slightly less in his, in his career, but again, similar sort of average. And you've got Matt Milnes, who a couple of years ago was the standout uncapped bowler in Division 1 of the County Championship. So from that point of view, you think how
best played for England 2 years ago.
Exactly, yeah. You think, like, how is that team not going to run away with it? And then you look at it from another point of view, you think actually Milnes is exciting, but averages nearly 30 with the ball, which isn't great for a counter seamer. Code, you just watch him and it's coming down at 70 miles an hour, and you think, like, actually, if the pitch isn't doing much, our team's just going to be able to see him off. And then Jordan Thompson is in the team as an all-rounder. He's not really a frontline seamer, and Bess sort of took a 5 on this final day, but has struggled since being left out by England. So from that point of view, you can think actually maybe there are holes there to exploit. And then you've got, at some point, there will be a CDC sanction on Yorkshire, and just if that is a championship points penalty for this season, then that and a defeat to a team they would expect to beat is already a sizable thing to make up. So I guess but the story felt like Leicestershire though, didn't it? And that was just a great last passage of play, because it was even quite late on. I felt that Yorkshire that a win was quite far away. Basically, they needed, it was, I think, 8 overs left. They needed about 8 or maybe a bit under. You think, like, this feels like a stretch with 3 wickets left, and Chris Wright played an absolute blinder. It was a great game of cricket.
Well, it was a new ball, really. They take Bess out, and I know Bess was reasonably expensive, but he wasn't super expensive. New ball, extra bit of hardness, and it's Chris Wright more than Handscomb really who sets the tone, and they get there with 7 balls to spare. I'm
really interested. I think I'm more interested to know if it's an anomalous result for Leicestershire than I am for Yorkshire as well. Like, day one, Yorkshire are 360 for 3, and you just think, oh, here we go again. I remember thinking on that day, I'd love to be a professional cricketer, but I'd hate to play for Leicestershire. Like, you just spend your summer fielding and losing, and then all of a sudden they pull out like one of the great victories. I was also really pleased for Rishi Patel, because I think 2 years ago now, Paul Nixon said, second mention of Paul Nixon. Paul Nixon said he reckons Patel could play for England in 4 years, and so we're halfway there, and he kind of topped it off with his maiden ton. So
just a couple of extra things from this game. Part of the reason why Yorkshire scored 517 was young Finley Bean, who's only 20. He scored 100 opening the batting. He looked very good, I thought. He scored 441 in a twos game last season, so he's highly thought of there. And I guess there's a new feel to that Leicester side. It's not just Rishi Patel, but Sol Budinger, who's come from Notts. He looks like he hits it. He bats at a good pace at the top of the order. And also they've got a young monster quick called Josh Hull, who's 6'7" and 18 years old. He was on first class debut and took 4 wickets across the match. Elsewhere in Division 2, I watched a lot of Sussex's win over Durham. And again, Sussex had a really, really difficult season last year. Only 1 win in Division 2. And they'd beaten a Durham side that had an attack of Matt Potts, Bryden Class, Ben Rain and Matt Kuhneman, who played in that Australia series in India recently. So a seriously good result there. And also to take 20 wickets without Ollie Robinson in the side is something they struggled to do for a lot of last season. So that's a good win for them.
Yeah, Durham were the side to, I think in pre-season they were the side to most vocally, I guess it makes sense when Stokes is a Durham player, to most vocally say, we're going to play like England, and they did kind of in this game. I think probably more than Yorkshire were close. They scored quickly in both innings, but the notable thing about Durham, I guess, is firstly they scored like that with no one making a big score in the first innings, make 376 at over 4.5 and over, and then second innings they were still scoring quickly despite collapsing to 189. So I mean, Matt Potts said that he's much rather lose than win, and they've lost here, and I guess that will be an early test for whether that holds out or not. I imagine it will for the first couple of weeks at least.
Elsewhere in the division, Gloucestershire did very well to salvage a draw against Glamorgan after conceding a 250-run first innings deficit, and Worcestershire beat Derbyshire. New recruit from Yorkshire, Matthew Waite, scored 100 and took a fourfer there. Not a good week for a couple of our ones to watch from last week's show. Josh Tongue, who was one of Joe's picks, went at fives over the game, and Kashif Ali, one of mine, didn't play. On to the IPL. As mentioned at the start, the IPL has been amazing over the last week. 200-plus chases sealed off the final balls of the game. Wisden India's Aadya Sharma joins us from India to tell us all about it. Aadya, we've had two historically brilliant games in the last few days. Rinku Singh hit 5 sixes off the last 5 balls for KKR against Gujarat to give KKR a stunning last ball victory there. And then yesterday you had a genuine classic. Virat Kohli was amazing in the power play, then slowed down against spin in the middle overs. Faf du Plessis and Glenn Maxwell put on 115 in 8 overs, basically. And look now, chased down 213 despite falling to 23 for 3 in the power play. Niklas Puran hit the third fastest IPL 50 ever, 62 off 19 balls. And then there was that crazy finish that involved a missed man-cad and a hit wicket. So that game pretty much had everything. Why is this IPL so high scoring? Those were 200-plus run chases, but in general, it feels like it's the highest scoring season yet.
Yeah, I mean, 2 incredible last ball finishes. I was fortunate to be there, covering one of them. But yeah, you're right. It seems like, the scores are being upped, high scoring games all through. I think 15 out of 15, I think 10 of them have been first innings 175 and above. So that's a good percentage. I guess the difference now this year has been that we are back to India, home and away format, more stadiums. Last 2-3 years, a season and a half we had in the UAE where there are slower pitches. You were having games in 2 to 3 venues. Last year also it was the same due to restricted to a few venues, Mumbai and around. So I guess pitches were going slower, and usually you see in IPL also the first half is generally a high scoring segment, and then pitches get slower. But yeah, I mean, this time the only difference I see is that you're playing more games at Chinnaswamy, which is a conventionally high scoring ground. There are games in Guwahati, that's a good surface. Even the Chennai wicket, which is usually slower. Even MS Dhoni was surprised. There's it seems to be a fresher wicket, more pace and all. So,
I feel like there's been an attitude change as well. As you say, it's the first time that the IPL has been held in India with a home and away format in 4 years, and 4 years represents quite a long percentage of the history of IPL cricket, the history of T20 cricket. And I just wanted to mention some of the media commentary that I don't think you would have seen in previous tournaments. So Harsha Bogle, the voice of Indian commentary, really, he's been very vocal about lost time with the bat, saying that it doesn't matter if you catch up later in your innings. If you're 15 or 15, whatever happens to the rest of the innings, you have already wasted those balls and you can't save that lost time later on. And Kohli received some criticism in a knock where he scored at a rate of nearly 140. That didn't used to happen. There seems to be a switch in how people talk about T20 batting. And I mean, I remember just two or 3 years ago, there was all this chat about David Malan and England's team, and basically people were like, well, it doesn't really matter about his slow starts because he catches up. Whereas now it seems like the conversation is now, no, it does matter even if you do catch up, you have already lost potential run scoring opportunities early on in the innings. That seems like there's been a shift in the conversation.
Yeah, you're right, actually. I mean, even the big names are sort of in the focus now that, you can't just slow it down. It's a different approach now. It's, as you mentioned, 4 years is a long time in, T20 history and IPL history. So it's a significant change. And teams have also identified that, you just need to go all out. given the amount of games that we've seen that are high scoring and being still chased down. So it's a significant shift for sure.
And do you think that the impact player rule has made a difference? Because it essentially means that teams can lengthen the batting lineup. They're essentially playing with 12, which means that if a team potentially is short on all-round options, they can get away with the lack of balance in their squad. Do you think that that's partly why teams, I guess, Stoinis yesterday batted with a type of aggression that was only really possible if you know that you've got an extra blanket of safety beneath you, the order which he did have in Badoni. So yeah, do you think that's made a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I think theoretically it's a great concept. You are at a certain juncture in your innings, and you know that you can have an extra batter depending on the situation. You could have an extra bowler if needed, but that extension of batting really creates a difference, and we've seen that happen. Rajasthan Royals bringing in someone like Dhruv Jurel who hasn't played an IPL game before, and he comes in and smashes, and then other teams have also done that. Like KKR sort of like swapped and brought in Venkatesh Iyer, who scored like 83 or 40 balls. So that sort of a dynamic batting order definitely helps. But I still think the teams haven't figured out the impact player as well so far. It's been pretty up and down. We still haven't seen the best use of impact player. A few teams, I'd say KKR has done decently well with impact player, LSG in parts, but no team has convincingly used the impact player as well so far.
Do you like it as a rule? I feel like it takes away a little bit from the all-rounder, which I think teams should benefit from having really strong all-rounders. It doesn't really feel like they get the same reward for having a player who can bat in the top six and also be a frontline bowling option.
I do get where you're coming from. Obviously, there's a better role for specialist players. You can, but I still feel that it's just made it more watchable. It's just more interesting. It's a tactic also that brings more interest into the game. I also feel that it's advantageous in a way that teams can field better players if they want to, like on the field also, just to improve their fielding, that way. And I also feel that it sort of expands the amount of people who are actually involved in the game. That makes it very interesting for me. I mentioned Jurel before, someone like a Badoni who comes in the second half and scores. These people might not be getting as many opportunities, but now they are. So there's more. I feel there are more roles to play, and I really like that way. But you're right, all-rounder wise, the impact of an all-rounder is sort of reduced.
I did like in the KKR RCB game when the pitch was very good for spinners, and KKR just add in a third spinner to their attack, Aadya Sharma, who'd never played any professional cricket before, even in domestic cricket in India. He comes on for his first ever game of professional cricket and he takes 3 wickets. But I liked that they could put a player like that in dependent on the surface, which it made that second innings more watchable in a way, but also it didn't because of how much of an advantage having that extra spinner was. So Chakravarti and Narayan just basically bowled out in the middle, and by that point the game was pretty much done. On KKR, I wanted to ask you about Rinku Singh. So fans in the UK probably haven't heard of him before, but 5 sixes off 5 balls to finish a game off is quite something. His numbers domestically are really impressive, and there's quite an interesting story behind his lack of India representation so far that I don't think people will know about.
Yeah, I mean, Rinku Singh has been around for a while, and the fact is that usually a lot of these uncapped players get attention through the IPL. Somehow, Rinku hasn't played a lot of IPL, even though he's a very promising domestic player. I guess it's to do with KKR also. I think he's been involved with only one team. They've had a stacked up middle order. They've always had, like, Russell. They had Karthik in the middle for a while. They've got Venkatesh Iyer. Shreyas Iyer is not there this time. So I think this season there's more space for Rinku Singh to grow. And this is not the first time also that he's been doing so well. I think last year also there was one game where he almost won them from an near impossible situation. He scored like 40 or 15, some 21, 23 runs in the last over. He's always had power. It's just that I think now, given that the KKR team was a little depleted, there is a better role for Rinku Singh to play. He knows that, he's got, he has he's got the freedom to go there and, score like he does. But yeah, obviously interesting story. This is, proper rags to riches, interesting background as well. He comes from a not so well off family, and he got that contract in the IPL, and he, he's been with KKR for like 4-5 years now. So it's an incredible story.
Well, thanks a lot for your time, Aadya. Aadya will be joining us every week for the rest of the IPL tournament. So we look forward to catching up next week. And Ben, finally, to finish off the show, what is your moment of the week?
Yeah, well, it's from the IPL, and it's a bit of Laws stuff, I suppose. It was the middle of the 3-1 last ball finishes that have been in the space of 3 days. There wasn't one for the first 8 days of the competition. They put 50p in the script writers, and now it's changed. So this was in a way. I mean, the Rinku Singh one obviously stands out, but this was the most one that swung to and fro, I think. And it came down to that. There's been loads that already happened. There's been a hit wicket, a bit more chaos, and then the last, it's what should be the last ball of the game, 1 run to win, 9 wickets down. Harshal Patel runs in, and then whether he's premeditated Bishnell's out of his ground or he just sees it, he goes to take off the bails, misses, and then turns and throws the stumps down, with Bishnell still just out of his ground, as you can see on the replays. But the umpires wave away the appeals for a pre-delivery run out, whatever you want to call it. And then they scramble up on the last ball of the game. And I was confused basically about why this was ruled, why the appeal was struck down. I enjoy reading the laws, as people who listen to this this show will know. And I had a close look. And
do you have much of the laws left to read?
That's true. It's more that whenever something happens, you find you have to read it in different ways to try and see what the emphasis should be and what you're supposed to understand. So there's a bit in the pre-delivery run-out section where it talks about what an umpire should do if the ball is not delivered, and if there is an appeal, and if there is not an appeal. And I assume this was the former case because there was an appeal eventually. But actually, when he misses the first time, at that point, the ball is not delivered and there is not an appeal. So that's why the umpires say dead ball. I received clarification from the MCC on this. And the main takeaway, as I often say, is that cricket is lucky to have lawmakers who are open to this sort of scrutiny and clarification, and to have written laws which do eventually make sense if you look at them hard enough, I think.
Excellent. Wonderful. What a way to finish the show. Cheers for coming in, Cam. Cheers, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back next week for the release of the Wisden Almanac.